my story, at least the stories from my books, they all started in this area. 12 years ago, in 2010, after being a spiritual student for 27 years at that point, I started having experiences with somebody who didn't live around here. Like, he actually didn't live on this planet, and he wasn't alive anymore. And I couldn't understand why this guy was interested in me. Because when he was alive, he was a famous musician, he was in a famous band, but I was not a fan of his band, because I was into hard rock and heavy metal like Led Zeppelin and AC/DC, and he was in a band that was more about beautiful, meaningful songs. And when I was younger, I wasn't interested in beautiful, meaningful songs. You know, I was a rock guitar player, you know. So it made no sense logically to me why George Harrison would be interested in me, because I wasn't interested in him. You know, there's lots of people we're interested in and lots of people that are off of our radar, you know. And I had two friends in this area because I had moved to this area. I had two friends who lived in this area who were starting to get interested in spirituality. And these were two people who I felt comfortable enough to share these experiences that back in 2010, those experiences would be called, they'd be under the heading of crazy. Okay, now I have to tell you that now, 12 years later, these things do not seem so crazy. And I have way more than two people to share this with that I had in 2010. And one of the people that I was able to share this stuff with was a new friend who I met at the expo here in Philadelphia. I think it was in Port Washington. That's Greg Campisi. So I used to call up Greg about once a week with a list of all the crazy things that had happened that week with George Harrison. You know, now at that point, George had died 9 years earlier, you know, and so Greg was kind enough to be a friend to me and listen and not judge me, because back then, wow, this was really a big topic of judgment. Now, one of the things that we have in this physical world that we don't have in the heavenly world is judgment. Okay, so all the different opinions and attitudes and beliefs that we have, that we hold on to so strong in this physical world, are non-existent in heaven. Really. So we have judgment about what God is and what God isn't. We have judgment about what a master is and what a master isn't. We have all these judgments, but those things only exist in this physical world. And not only judgment, we have this thing in the physical world called competition. So it appears in this physical world that this church is in competition with this temple and also in competition with this synagogue. It looks like Jesus and Buddha and Moses and Krishna and all the other religions. It looks like Jesus and Buddha and Moses and Krishna are all in competition for you, for your vote, for your 20 bucks every Sunday, for your belief. But that only appears that way because we are in this physical world where we have this thing called judgment and we have this thing called competition. So what happens is that my book, Channeling Harrison, is released in 2014. And the very first place that I did one of my events was at Pebble Hill, really close to here. And Suzanne had helped me set up 9 events, Suzanne Duval. Some people call her Susan, but for some reason, I have it that she's supposed to be Suzanne because that sounds French. And I know that intuitively, she has a French connection. You know, not the movie, The French Connection, but you know what I'm saying. Okay. Just to be clear, you know, I don't want you to think Suzanne is involved in some kind of heist or something in Brooklyn, like The French Connection, right? So, yeah, that's how I got started here in this area. And so I did this first event in Pebble, and it was a start of my whole thing of sharing these experiences and these stories, and the PowerPoint presentation of these incredible things that George manifested through me, that I'm sure all of you, when I was doing those events here in 2010, 14, 15, and 16, because that's when the book came out in 2014, with my experiences from 2010 to 2013, you know. And I had a PowerPoint that was incredibly convincing, because there were things that I did, like my very first painting. I was not a painter. I was always good at music since I was a kid, but because I couldn't draw well, I never would ever consider making a painting, right? Because if I can't draw, why would I try to take a step up and make a painting, you know? And I made a 4-foot by 3-foot painting of 3 great pyramids surrounded by burgundy, golden brown. I worked on this thing for 9 hours, really, really obsessively. When I was finished, I felt this sense of peace. And then a couple of weeks later, I had been sharing these stories about George Harrison with one of my friends, and they showed me a book, and it had George wearing his favorite jacket at the after party for the concert for Bangladesh, and I had painted his jacket. Right? So interestingly enough, the concert for Bangladesh was on August 1st, 1971. And if you look at the numerology, it's a 999. August 1st is 8, 8 plus 1. August 1st is 9, 171. Out of 1971 is 9. And you have another 9. So it's 3 9s. And the 3-9 numeric signature had been showing up in my life so much, it was ridiculous. I kept being discriminating on my experiences and minimizing, but the thing I could not minimize was the fact that there were certain numbers that appeared and repeated everywhere in my life. The number 999 was the first number that appeared. The second number that appeared was 14. And then I started seeing 9 and 14 everywhere. And it took me 5 years until I understood why that was repeating. It's because 914 is the numerology for I am. We know an A is a 1. Right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. I is a 9, and M is a 4. So 9 and 14, for some reason, I am is interested in showing me that it's involved in all of these areas of my life, because this number showed up everywhere. Okay, so I did these events, and when I started to do these events, something really weird happened. This is 2014. So for me, in 2014, this was weird. What happened is that I would talk for 45 minutes, and then I would do a flute meditation for a half hour, and then I would tell people they could share their experiences if they wanted to. Well, the weird thing that happened is that when I asked if anybody wanted to share their experience, this woman in the front row raised her hand. She said, well, my mom showed up to me in spirit. She looked so happy. She was way younger than I remember her looking at the end of her life. And she showed me all around heaven and connected me with my relatives who are now there, and they gave me messages to give to my cousins who are still alive on earth. Thank you so much. Now, I can't roll my eyes at that person because I'm in front of the audience because I didn't believe this. Right? So can you imagine hearing this for the first time? They didn't teach me anything about this in middle school. Right? Nobody ever told me that this was possible. I never had this experience myself. So I naturally, logically thought that that person was crazy. So I didn't know what to say. So I said, does anybody else want to share their experience? And then the second person shared the same thing with her grandma, right? And that first night, there were 5 people who shared that experience, you know. And I'm thinking, man, is there something up with the water in this animal? You know what I mean? I never heard of this. I never heard of this. And if I ever saw anything on TV about it, I clicked the channel as fast as I could because I thought, who believes in this stuff? And what happened is that I did 509 events between 2014 and 2019. And at every single event, 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 people at every single event, 500 events in a row, people were sharing these experiences. So I became a believer after it happened 400 times. You know, I'm not quick to catch on. So what a lot of you guys are interested in is what has happened over the last couple of years during COVID. And since my last book that was released in 2018, it's called The True Story of Jesus and His Wife, Mary Magdalene, that is now being made into an audiobook. And believe it or not, I am making the audiobook with Clifford Carter, who is the piano player with James Taylor for the last 12 years, and also with Art Garfunkel. And believe it or not, we started making the audiobook unintentionally on August 1st. Incredible, you know? So between 2018, when that book came out, so just to go back a minute, Channeling Harrison came out in 2014. In 2015, I made an audiobook called My Experiences with Lennon and Harrison. Because when I was finishing writing Channeling Harrison, I found out through a channeler, and then through my own experience, that my experiences with George was not only with George. Apparently, the friends that we have in our physical lives continue to be our friends when our physical lives are over and our heavenly lives begin full-time. And so it was weird because about a year before this happened, I made a painting of John Lennon's face with the words "Imagine" above it. And underneath it, it said, "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one." And this was before I knew that John had anything to do with this thing with George, because I was having a hard enough time just believing that this thing with George was really happening. You know what I mean? You know, so how you get it, right? So I decided to make this painting. At least I thought it was my idea. Okay. And I looked up a picture of John Lennon's face so I could try to draw his face, even though I'm just a beginning painter, artist, you know, I don't know what I'm doing with this stuff. So I needed to have a picture, you know. So I looked it up and I saw that his name was John Winston Lennon. And I was living in Winston Towers. And I thought, wow, isn't that a coincidence? Like, what are the chances that I'm living in Winston Towers? And that's his middle name. And so I had a logical thought that I shared with my mom. The logical thought is, we obviously know that for some reason, for 3 years, George keeps appearing in my life. There's nobody who's part of my life that has a problem saying this, because they've seen all the things that have happened, manifested continuously, right? So my logical thought was, if George is connected with me somehow from heaven, somehow, for some reason, do you think he's still friends with John Lennon in heaven? Now, back then, when I was having this thought around 2012, that seemed like a pretty crazy thought, you know? And so I shared this with my mom. So I said, if George is really interested in me for some reason, and if he and John are both in heaven, I mean, I don't know if they live on the same street in heaven. You know, I don't know if they're still friends. You know, I don't know the intricacies about the Beatles of, you know, who's friends with each other and who's not friends with each other. You know, but it just seemed like, well, maybe they're friends. So if they are friends, maybe it's possible that George told John about me, because for some reason, George is appearing everywhere in my life every week. So that's kind of logical, even though it goes under the category in 2012 as crazy, right? So then I thought, you know, maybe there's a connection. Maybe there's a reason why I'm living in Winston Towers, and John's middle name is Winston. Well, all of these things continue to happen over the years. And so Channeling Harrison was published in 2014. The audiobook of my experiences with Lennon and Harrison was published in 2015, towards the end of 2015. And then what started happening, and honestly, it's all Greg's fault. Because what happened was I had done my Channeling Harrison events, telling these stories with a PowerPoint a bunch of times around here. And Greg called me up. He says, you know, people love your stories, but what do you think about coming to my meditation event on Wednesday nights? On one Wednesday night, and not telling any stories, but just play a half-hour meditation and then give people a chance to share. And then take a break and then do a second half-hour meditation, right? So by this time, I've been doing those events for a year. And it was normal for me to hear 10 people, 15 people every night telling me they connected with their mom, their grandmother, their best friend from childhood who died young. Like, this is normal because I'm hearing this 3-4 nights a week for 6 months. So I agreed to do this meditation at Greg's house without telling any stories. And I finished the first meditation. And I said, who wants to share? And this guy in the back says, Jesus appeared to me. And he was standing in the corner over there on the left. Now, this is me. This is the guy from Brooklyn who is struggling to open my mind that this stuff is real and that it's normal. And now a guy in the room, now I have somebody saying that they see Jesus in the room. I grew up in a Jewish family. So I'm telling you, that went over like a big, gigantic bomb in my head, you know? And so I just listened. I just listened to him because it sounded so crazy to me, you know? So when he was done, and I just said, well, does anybody else have anything they want to share? You know, because honestly, I'm trying to change the subject, you know? And this woman says, I saw Jesus standing in the same spot as him in the left corner over there. And she repeats everything that this guy had just shared in his experience. Now, one of the things that I had said, you know, you guys all know that I've been doing these events about my experiences with George Harrison. George Harrison had dark hair, dark eyes. He had a dark beard. You know, is it possible that it's George it's really George, but you think it's Jesus because they look similar from what we've been told? And the guy said, no, I thought the same thing, actually. And he said, when I had that thought, I wonder if that's Jesus or if it's George Harrison. At that moment, Jesus showed him for sure that it was him. And I'll leave out the gory details. Okay, but it was definitely, he was convinced it was absolutely Jesus, right? So now I have two of these people and I'm thinking, wow, what is normal anymore? And that brings us to now in 2022, because a couple of years ago, we all started experiencing a reality physically that was so far from normal, from what we had all experienced before that, before this whole thing of what's happened in the last couple of years. And one of the things that I started to realize is that the world had gotten so weird that this spiritual stuff did not seem weird anymore. I mean, really, what could be weirder than everything we have seen in the last 2, 3, 4 years? You know? And so I came up with this theory that the weirdness of the world, that the changes in the world were somehow making it easier for humanity to open its mind that this spiritual stuff really isn't so weird anymore. You know, because nothing could be as weird, or that wonderful word unprecedented that's become like a major buzzword in our life for the last couple of years, you know? And so people are more open-minded to this stuff now, you know? And so how much time do I have left?
About
5 minutes. Okay. So just follow this for a second, because I'm trying to lead you to something, right? So if my first book was Channeling Harrison, and the first 3 times George appeared to me in a dream when I was not a believer at all, the first time, 3 times he appeared to me, he looked at me with such a serious look. I can't even make a face that serious. I can't even imagine why somebody who I didn't know from my physical life would be appearing to me and looking at me with a serious look that went right through me. I just couldn't. Like, if you're trying to make friends with somebody, don't you smile? Right? So why would he appear to me with this look like the weight of the world is on his shoulders? And what am I going to do? Me, what am I going to do? Why am I even in this conversation? And so the main theme of my whole book, Channeling Harrison, the 2 questions that everybody asked me, including Greg, was, why did George pick you? And what is all this about? Because from my perspective, I couldn't understand why I was involved in this at all, because I was a Led Zeppelin fan. I didn't know how to play the Beatles songs, but I knew every Led Zeppelin song and every AC/DC. So my first book is called Channeling Harrison. Okay, that takes me from here to here. And then I find out that John Lennon is his partner, and I'm doing all these events, and all these people are having all of these experiences with their loved ones, right? And then Jesus starts appearing to people, and Mother Mary, and Buddha, Moses, and Krishna, and Gandhi, Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, every goddess you can name, every ascended master you can name. And 8,000 people who came to my events between 2014 and 2019 had an experience with one of their loved ones, or one of the ascended masters, or one of the archangels. And so I compiled this whole story as my 3rd book that was called The True Story of Jesus and His Wife, Mary Magdalene. Now, I didn't know anything about Mary Magdalene. I have found out a lot about Mary Magdalene. And being that I only have 2 minutes left, I'm going to tell you one little piece that's going to make you think. Okay? So, in all the Easter movies, we know that on that terrible day 2,000 years ago, there were 3 men that unfortunately were tortured like that. Okay? But only one of those 3 men was taken down off the cross after 6 hours and put in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. Okay? That's in the Bible. That's one nugget of truth that's in the Bible. That's where Jesus was put. And in the Bible, the last person seen at the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea is Mary Magdalene. The reason why Jesus was the only one of those 3 guys to be taken down off the cross and put in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb is because Joseph of Arimathea was his father-in-law. Mary Magdalene was Joseph of Arimathea's daughter. Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. That's why he was put in his father-in-law's tomb. Joseph of Arimathea was the grandfather of Jesus and Mary Magdalene's 3 children. Doesn't that make a lot more sense? Because I don't know about you, but if somebody came into work or into the mall and told me, you know, there was this guy, he was beat up and tortured, and then he just disappeared into thin air. Really, what would it take the police right now for you to go to the police department and say, you know what, my buddy, my friend, somebody, they were beat up and tortured, and then they just disappeared? Well, police would say, well, is there any clothes? Nope. Well, are there any bones or any parts of his body anywhere? Nope. And now the police are going to say, so you're expecting me to believe that this guy who got beat up and tortured disappeared into thin air? Thank you. Thank you. Honestly, I was thinking the same thing. Because what would it take to get you to believe something like that? Don't you think it would be easier to believe something that actually has some common sense to it and some reality of biological limitations? We have a physical body. A physical body is not going to just disappear unless you believe in ETs, and we're not going there today. So There is a connection between George and John and the entire heavenly team. Because I have to tell you something, we separate everything and we discriminate everything. And if you think about Buddha, Jesus, Moses, and Krishna, they all had a message, right? And there are people who still believe in that message and still repeat their words. Well, George Harrison and John Lennon had a message. And people are still repeating their words and their message 40 years after John was killed. And now, let's say it's about 15 years since George died. Their message is being repeated. So if this is John Lennon's song Imagine, and you're singing this as a song of hope, what is the difference between you getting hope from John Lennon's lyrics or hope from the Christian Bible or the Hindu Bible or the Buddhist Bible or the Jewish Bible? What is the difference? We're still repeating their message because it's something that resonates with us, touches us, and we want to resonate. So what I'm saying to you is that all of the good guys and the good gals in heaven, they're all on the same team. I swear to God to you, they are not in competition. They're not, it's not like Jesus and Buddha and Moses and Krishna saying, okay, I got 10 of them today, how many did you get? No, I'm sorry, that's not my example. They're all working on the same team. And one of the things that I found out through my events is that they really, really work together because there were many people, hundreds of people came to my meditations who had experiences with Yogananda and Jesus and Buddha. And they weren't tallying up who had the most followers that day. They were basically trying to say, we're all connected. We're all trying to bring out the good in life, you know? And one of the things that I have come up to the belief of is that there's really only 3 religions in this world. There are the people who are trying to make things better. There are people who are actively making things worse. And then there are people who are doing nothing. And at the end of the day, whatever language you speak, it all comes down to what are you doing with your life? Are you trying to make this world better? Or are you just not caring? You know, every day we have opportunities to make a difference. So let's make a difference.